Vas-y. Everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming as the LSE French Forum, the LSE Women in Business, and the KCL Energy Society are delighted to welcome Estelle Brachlianoff today at LSE. Humanity is currently facing one of, if not the biggest, crisis it has ever faced. Spreading awareness is important, small actions are critical, but we're in a hurry, and humanity will also need to use the influence and capacities of large companies, such as Veolia, to efficiently transition. Therefore, it seemed important to us to promote discussions such as the one today to better understand the potential of such companies, but also its limitations. However, the theme today is not only Veolia, it is also Estelle Brachlianoff. We are lucky enough to welcome the future CEO of a multi-billion revenue company, and we are all eager to hear about her experience and the requirements of the role she is about to endorse.
For a small reminder, Estelle Brachlianoff, it's a master degrees from École Polytechnique and École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussées. She started her career in the public sector, working in transport infrastructures, joined Veolia in 2005 in the waste management sector, and from 2012 to 2018, she was Senior Executive Vice President for the UK and Ireland and became a member of Veolia's Executive Committee. In July 2018, she was appointed Chief Operating Officer and will officially become CEO on the 1st of July. The introduction was short to allocate a maximum of time to the discussion. So without further ado, we want to reiterate our honor to welcome Estelle Brachlianoff, and she now has the floor.
Good evening or good afternoon to you all. Thank you for your kind words and warm welcome. And I guess it's a very specific pleasure to be, back in London, which as a city is very close to my heart, and as a country, the UK is as well. It has played a very specific role in my life, both professional and personal. And it's part of the pleasure and part of the reason why I accepted your invitation, together with the theme of tonight, which is the building a better tomorrow. And of course, this is something which Veolia is very, very much at the heart of, or part of the solution, if you want. And that's why this idea resonates very specifically and very, very much strongly. In our purpose, because we've defined a purpose at Veolia, so you have a 2 pages long and a summary of it. We conclude this purpose by saying that Veolia is preparing the future, protecting the environment while meeting the vital needs of humanity. So we're talking basically about human progress, a word which may sound a little bit outdated, but I think it's at the forefront of everything we want to do and everything we stand for. So I guess first question is, what does it mean to be preparing the future for a CAC 40 company, which is also the world leader in environmental services? And I guess surprisingly, it starts by being true to our history. So it looks at the past, or look at your roots, if you want. And our roots as Veolia are starting in, the company was founded in 1853 in Lyon, and started in the water sector, obviously, with a belief, which is that access to drinking water was an essential lever for human health as well as quality of life. I guess that was 170 years ago, but you can understand how still it's very much relevant, and how we've moved from there to where we are as a company today, and what we want to become, what we aim at becoming, which is the worldwide champion for ecological transformation. So I just wanted to spend just a few minutes on what is ecological transformation. So it's just 2 words. I will start with the second, which is ecological transformation, as opposed to transition, which is on the title of the slide today. What is the difference between transition and transformation? I won't make a long story, but basically, transformation is made much more intense and quick and voluntary, as opposed to something smoother, which will take I guess, quite a long time. And this is a big belief on Veolia that basically we don't have much time, so we should speed up. And there is an urgent need to transform both the industries and the cities we live in to tackle the biggest problem, if you want, our planet face. The second one is ecological, and it's not, I guess, energetical transformation, for instance, or transition. It's way beyond that and way larger. Of course, you know, like the big thing is today about global warming, and it's one of the biggest problems our planet faces, and the solution about decarbonation we can bring. But we have other things to tackle, and I say we, as a society as a whole, and as a planet as a whole. I can talk about the depletion of resources, which is a big challenge as well. The collapse of the biodiversity, or how do we feed 9 billion human beings on this planet very soon, or multiple forms of pollutions, starting with, say, air pollution in a city like London. How do we tackle those? So it goes way beyond energy or decarbonation. And what we do as a company, as Veolia, is trying to bring solution to these big challenges. We are part of the solution, only part of it, of course, but nonetheless, it's a solution bringing. So it's our business. The solution we have today, and we want to, you know, implement in most places, and the solution we invent for tomorrow. The solution we don't have yet, basically, and we want to innovate and to find. And we do that with offerings or solution to our customers, with basically our industries or municipalities and cities. And they come to us and say, okay, what do you have for me to try and be more, I guess, you know, produce less CO2, to be more, you know, circular in the circular economy mode, or to, you know, like pollute less, and to treat those pollutants before they come into the underground water and the air, and so on and so forth. That's exactly our business. So solution bringing, that's the big thing, and that's really what we are about. And in terms of solution, I alluded to it, but you know, we tend to say within the company that we have the forests, the trees and the seeds. The forest being the solution we've mastered for a very long time, and we can still modernize. And I'm going to give you for example. The trees, we already know it works, but we want to duplicate them in many more places and many more customers. And the seeds, which are the little something you have to grow into a tree and then a forest, which are more, you know, the solution for tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So starting with the solution we've mastered for a very long time, we can still modernize them. And let me give you a few examples. I'm talking about water treatment, the same water treatment, you know, which we founded our company from. And it still is very critical for the planet now. And how can we modernize them? We're talking about, of course, digitalization and consumer facing and all the rest of it, but as well on treating new pollutants, say endocrine disruptors, which can be in water, or, you know, microplastics. Okay, what can we do to treat and be even by raising the bar? What about consuming less chemicals and less energy to actually treat this water, which of course, you know, is very much relevant. If I move to, say, waste, of course, the more we have a larger population on the planet, the more it produces waste, and same goes with the industry, and we have to treat this waste as opposed to leave it somewhere in the ground. Modernizing the solutions means, you know, again, lots of digital or artificial intelligence to help sort the waste more efficiently. And sorting is a key factor to eventually, you know, recycling and be more circular. In terms of the solution, which are a bit more recent that we've developed and we want to implement more and more. Again, a few examples. So it's my trees in my metaphor. We're talking about plastic recycling here. So we can recycle now every year or every 2 years, more and more type of plastics, you know, like the PET here. And I would encourage you, by the way, to try to avoid having those from now on. Tap water is perfectly all right in London, and you can have a jug instead. So if you want to be true to your beliefs, maybe that's a good initiative from now on. Plastic recycling, the good news is this, we can easily recycle now. 10 years ago, that was not the case. It seems very obvious, but to be able to recycle that, you have to be able to do it what we call food grade. So it's so clean in the end, the recycled plastic, that you can put water back in it and drinking it without having any harm. So I guess it's a higher quality you can imagine of recycling of plastics. Reuse of wastewater is something we know how to do, but we can do in other places. In Windhoek, which is, as you all know, the capital of Namibia, we drink water, which actually we've cleaned out of wastewater. So it's purely recycled water, if you want. Technologically speaking, we really can do it, I would say, not easily, but we know how to do it. But it's only 5% worldwide of the wastewater which are recycled this way. When you think that water scarcity is so much a problem everywhere, by the way, including in this country, for those of you who think that since it rains a lot in the UK, there is no water scarcity, that's something which is not true. Actually, south of Birmingham, you have water scarcity in this country as much as in the west part of the US or in some part of Australia. For lots of reasons I could explain if you have time. So basically, recycling water, as opposed to using it only once, is something we can do. And we are ready to expand to more and more countries and more places in the world. I guess another example of the solution we can develop more, it's clean, locally sourced, affordable energy. And guess what? With the Ukraine war, we are just, experiencing as of today, you can imagine that locally sourced, clean, affordable source of energy ticks a lot of boxes, including in terms of strategic autonomy of our countries. And where to find those sources of energy? Typically in the methanization of waste or wastewater. Methane is nothing but gas, as in exactly the same as the natural gas which comes from Russia or elsewhere from the Northern Sea. So we have those solutions and we can develop them more in more countries. And the third part, my seeds, is actually the solution for tomorrow, the innovative solution, which we haven't yet all the elements to do, but we are on our way and we're investing. Here, let me give you again some examples. We can mine our waste to find new resources, such as the precious materials and precious rare earths or minerals that we need to feed the economy of tomorrow. You cannot have an electrical car batteries without lithium and cobalt. Okay, those are rare materials that will need more and more in tomorrow's economy and even today's economy. And it happens that we can find some of those rare metals and materials in our waste, in our cities. Palladium, we have a process, an innovative process, which we found palladium in the street sweepings of Birmingham. Same applies with the electrical batteries, which we can recycle and extract those materials so we can put them back into a loop of producing other electrical car batteries. CO2 is the same. CO2 is good to capture CO2, but we are aiming at transforming CO2 into, for instance, sustainable aviation fuel to be used as a fuel in airplanes. I have lots of ideas as well that we are developing as Veolia in the agriculture sector, in terms of how do you use fertilizers, which are not chemical fertilizers, but organic fertilizers made out of wasted things and actually sludge. So as you can see, by maybe the energy and the enthusiasm having all the example I gave you is like, we defend an optimistic vision of the future, which is not a blissful optimism, an optimism rooted in scientific progress, in constant innovation and rethinking, as well as in co-construction and partnership with all our stakeholders, be they cities and customers, the planet, or all the stakeholders we have. So I believe in progress. We believe in progress, of course, with a lot of, lots of element to it, but together we can do it. Thank you.
I just wanted to say regarding the bottle of water, we know we're very sure. We're actually talking about it earlier, and we were both saying we're going to use one of each to bring to LSE every day, because usually we don't use this, but we thought it was easier to recycle than glass. Wow. Why we chose this bottle?
You're right. It's better than glass bottle.
That's exactly what
which is heavier.
Which some people actually asked us for. Instead of plastic, they
go for tap water. That's perfect.
So, so we wanted to start a little bit by understanding why Veolia, how it was created, and go a little bit in its history. We think that it has a very interesting profile because it came from the Compagnie Générale des Eaux, who was created in 1853 by an imperial decree, and which later became Vivendi. In 1999, Vivendi separated its environmental activities with the rest, and this branch became Veolia Environment in 2003. So could you quickly explain how your company went from a public water utility to a leader of ecological transformation?
So I will do I guess a short version, because if I go back to 1853, and I haven't, although I'm older than all of you, I was not born in 1853. That's the news of today. But globally speaking, we started by, water treatment, as I explained, as a belief that it could treat a question of health for human being and quality of life. And starting from this big belief, I guess the whole expansion of the group had two main, I would say, roots, which we've kept from the start until now. One is, I guess, the PPP model, as in it's usually private-public partnership, or cities together with private companies, or industries together with private companies. But there is a notion of partnership here, as opposed to you can deal with it all by yourself, like you have a problem, you try to find a solution. So there is this, which was all the way from 1853 until now, which goes with the long-term, I would say, not only thinking, but doing. Veolia is a long-term company. We don't think, like 3 months, 6 months. We think we're ready to take risk, and we're ready to have contracts and to take commitments on 5, 10, 15 years. And when you talk about the subject we're talking today, that's absolutely critical to be able not to be short-sighted and to be able to see long-term. And the second big thing was, again, this belief in human progress and ecological transformation, which at the start was very water, because it's exactly what the challenge was in 1853, but progressively expanding into waste, and then more recently to energy. So I guess two main themes, the stakeholders and partnership elements and long-term, together with the human progress and health, they all came to where we are today.
Thank you very much. So I'm now going to be asking a question about Veolia currently. So nowadays, Veolia operates all over the world and is active in mostly 3 sectors: water, waste, and energy. On the other hand, when discussing the environment, we usually think that local and targeted solutions are the most adequate. So as a COO and a soon-to-be CEO, overseeing all those operations, what is your strategy to move such? Is it to decentralize decision-making? And if it is, how do you transfer knowledge from the different regions?
I guess you probably have part of the answer already, as in a 40 billion turnover group with 220,000 employees. Yes, I'm not deciding everything, and that's very lucky I'm not. Not only because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't be the best placed. And I guess that's more important than anything. Veolia is a very, decentralized organization. You alluded to it, for a lot of reasons, but basically to be able to adapt to every single country's needs. So although there was progressively convergence into the big themes of ecological transformation across the globe, we don't do exactly the same way in France, in the UK, in the US, in Australia, in Germany, in Chile, in Mexico. All the countries I've mentioned are countries where we have a big presence. We do quite differently in the reality of it, things with a big overarching strategies and non-negotiable. But the how is really left to local people to decide, depending on their legislation, about the context and the priorities. And that's super important. So I guess I wouldn't describe us as a multinational company. We're more a multi-local company with an overarching goal and an ambition, an overarching shared means, if you want, more so than a multinational companies, which has like one product, and the idea would be to sell the most of exactly the same across the globe. So it's not at all what we are really.
And so, for example, if you were to enter a new country, what would be the processes? Would you try to learn about the country first? Would you recruit local people first? Would you?
So I guess we usually don't decide to enter a new country like that. So it's not decided at the headquarters, precisely for the reason I mentioned. So we have regional heads or chief exec. Say South America, you have one country head per country, but we're not in all countries. And you have a guy in charge of all South America. And he thinks there is some things to do in Peru, for instance. The first thing is that we're going to recruit a head of Peru, who's going to be usually Peruvian, who's going to, have local contacts and understand, where we can be. Plus we start from scratch, usually. So that's quite different from decided at the headquarters, we should enter a new country. And then I mentioned the non-negotiables. So there are some countries where even if there is good business to be done and population growth and industry is asking or whatever, we decide not to go. It could be for safety reasons, for security reasons. It could be just for compliance reasons. Some countries are too difficult to deal with if we want to do the right things in the right way, and we just decide that it's not for us. So there are parts of the world where we forbid ourselves to even enter. So that's another angle to it. So maybe the guy would say, let's enter, I won't mention the specific name of a country, but you have some in South America, which would be in my category. And we say, no, we won't do it. Whatever, I guess, the business case would be for it.
So you talked about having to adapt to different cultures, but globally, what do you feel is your role as a leading company in changing people's and government mindsets? And do you have any example, maybe personal examples?
So my culture and the mindset may be a bit different. I guess culture of a company, if it's your question, is different from culture in a country, probably. But culture of a company is a mix of things. And since we are merging with Suez, we've thought a lot about what is the Suez culture versus the Veolia culture. Are there big differences or not, and so on and so forth. And probably in my introduction word, you've understood what part of the Veolias culture is about. It's long-term. There is an element of scientific-based engineer in the French sense of engineer. So I guess chartered engineer. There is a belief in human progress. So it's really what Veolia is about, as opposed to other companies. So I think that's very, very much grounded in our culture. And it happens that Suez is quite alike in that respect. So we are confident the mergers should be very successful as well for that reason. Plus, a culture of a company is myth, which is at times not reality. So we're all told when you enter a company, myth about Mr. X founder who you are told the story about. Could be in the 80s, in the 90s, 3 years ago, but you're told myth. So it's part of the storytelling as well, but it usually is grounded into the reality of, what differentiates the company again, for ourselves, the long-term engineer and science base is something super, super important. In terms of mindset in a country, or how do you transform, as in, for more green, if it's your question, I'm guessing. It's a little bit different. And I guess there is no obvious, so I guess the first thing is to maybe dispel the myth, such as this country is greener than that one, as in the population would be more eager to have green solution. Yes, you have some, but in the end, I guess the Western world, if it's OECD type of definition, type of definition, everybody is really, it's pushing, from the population up to their, like politicians or companies or everything, and pretty much everywhere across the globe, if I may say. So that's the basis for that is not always the same, but it's globally pushing in very, very lots of places. Then the question is how to change the behavior as opposed to just it's pushing, but nothing happens. That's quite something different. And it's usually a bit of a mixture with some specific moments where things speed up. Just to give you an example about plastic recycling, which I mentioned. For 10 years in Europe, there was legislation which was saying, like recycling plastic is better than just putting it in a landfill or burning it. Legislation was existing and there was a little bit of plastic recycling, just a little bit. But the main part was not recycled. And nobody did care so much, a little bit. At the same time, companies like us, we were investing in innovation to try to push the next frontier of what type of recycled plastic we can deliver rather than just the usual one. Because 10 years ago, we didn't know how to recycle that and to put, again, water in it and to do food grade, as I explained. So we were investing, but was it a lot of traction and demand? No. So you may think, okay, the technology was happening. There was a legislation, but things changed dramatically one day to the next. It was roughly 3 years ago. And what happened? What happened? Mainly the push from the general public towards the consumer goods companies. And it was in the UK, the film the Blue Planet by Attenborough, which like everybody realized, wow, the oceans in 2040, there will be more plastic in the ocean than there will be fish if we go on like that. Suddenly everybody was like, wow, what's happening? And in France, it was another picture of a turtle, actually in that case, which shocked the general public. And then the general public, as consumers, put pressure on the consumer goods companies, which themselves thought, wow, we're very soon going to have a problem if the general public is shocked by plastic now, as opposed to a year before, not at all. And they went to see us and say, oh, do you know how to recycle plastic? I want more, I want more, I want more. So for 10 years, we were not interesting a lot of people. And suddenly they wanted more and more and more. And suddenly the plastic recycling has gone up and up and up. So it's usually a mixture of a general public solution, as in industrial solution, like a company like Veolia, legislation, because otherwise it won't work. And at one point, it kind of gels. So I guess that's a specific example of how to change the mindset. So you have a role to play into that, if I may.
Yeah, in the future, yes, right now.
No, now. Are you recycling in, are you wasting food a lot? I don't know. I don't want you to answer to me now, but you have to ask yourself, what are you doing on a daily life?
So you mentioned the merger with Suez, who was your main competitor, and we wanted to know what it meant for the future of Veolia. What kind of new opportunities it could bring? What are the risks maybe of such a huge merger right now when we know the crisis is accelerating? And we know that you have been very active. We read actually in the Financial Times that you were very active during the takeover. And so I think it interests all of the room how this kind of things work. What do you have to take in consideration and why in the end you decided to do this right now?
So lots of questions into one. The French are famous for very short questions, but very long answers. So maybe you're French and I am, so it's long question and long answer. Sorry about that. The first is what will it bring to bring those companies together? So basically we're buying the international arms of Suez because in France, it wouldn't be possible for antitrust reasons, and Suez keeps their name and brand in France on a separate company, which is not taken over by Veolia. So it's kind of everywhere but in France, to summarize. What is it bringing? We can say size first, of course. Although we have to realize that even on a 40 billion turnover group, we have something like 5% market share. Why is that so? Because it's a very, very local series of business everywhere across the globe. You have lots of competitors in China, in the US, you have private equity funds and so on and so forth. So, although we're, probably the leading player now, we still have a very small market share. More interestingly, I guess, it brings, very big complementarities between the two groups. And that's why we will probably very soon accelerate the finding new solutions for the ecological transformation. So our goal is that 1 + 1 = 3. So maybe I'm not good enough in math, but that's exactly what I would aim at doing. Complementarity in terms of geography. Veolia and Suez are not in the same countries where we are in the same countries, we're not on the same type of activity. Typically, Spain, Veolia is in the energy business, Suez in the water business. In the US, we are in the hazardous waste business, and Suez is in the water business. I could multiply the examples. So in the same countries, we're not in the same type of area, so we're going to be stronger in those countries. The second thing is complementarity of know-how, and I guess that's as important, if not more. If I go on with my example of reusing water that we've done in Windhoek in Namibia, Veolia has a very, very good historical knowledge and know-how in how to produce fertilizers, organic fertilizers out of sludge and other type of organic component. Suez is very good at reusing water. Why is that so? Because precisely they had a big presence in Spain. And in Spain, the reuse of water is something which was much more developed than in France. It's 15%, which is reused in Spain as opposed to 0.01% in France and pretty much 0.01% in the UK as well. So I guess, by combining the two know-how of, producing organic fertilizer and reuse of water, you can imagine that we have an offer for the agriculture sector, which is quite unique, and that's what we believe into. So it's really about people. There are some technologies as well, but it's really about people, combining forces of people, because we are in a business where the question is not the patent, the question is the know-how accumulated over the years on how to be more efficient in this and that, and how to save water and reuse and so on and so forth. So it's really the big goal for that. In terms of the takeover itself and the whole process from started at the summer 2020, and we are now the owner for the last 2 months basically. So it took us a bit over a year. That was a fierce battle. For those of you who read a little bit, the financial press, with hostility and counterfire and whatever and all the rest of it. And during this fierce battle, I guess lots of lessons learned. The first one is fortune favors the brave. Because I can tell you that when basically Suez was put for sale at the end of July 2020 by its shareholder NG, and after a month during the summer, we put an offer on the table of the shareholders, say we can buy it at that price. It's a firm offer now. It was not exactly an easy move. That was quite a bold move for everyone. But so I guess there is an element of you have to dare and to go for it if you believe into something. That's for certain. Had we analyzed that for another 6 months just to do the pros and cons and all the rest of it, we'll never be where we are today. So there is an element of go for it, and fortune favors the brave. The reality is everybody had that in mind as a possibility for years, because it was a history that has been gone for years. But in the end, when there is a little bit of an opening, you go for it. That's the first thing. The second thing is be true to your belief, because, you know, with all these ups and downs and bumps on the roads, and I guess we had like 20 specific legal battles in parallel at one point. You can be lost in the okay, you know, specific tactical things, but the tactical things have nothing to do with okay, what do you want to achieve here? So we always had to think back, what do we want to achieve here? What's the beacon, if you want? And that was super clear from the start and hasn't changed a single way during the, and I think that was super important in the outcome. And the third one is probably the team spirit and be as one team. And I can tell you, lots of people have tried to divide this team, but we never did. We all were as one, with all that complementarity. And that's part of probably the lesson I draw from this.
And following up on this, you mentioned obviously a lot of problems we're facing during your speech. You talked about agriculture one now and the potential with Suez. What kind of setbacks you currently see in the environmental transformation excites you with this merger with Suez, and maybe like projects where you really felt and helped you push through this difficult merger?
I guess there is a push from the populations everywhere, not everywhere, but in many places. So that's done. I said that because a few years ago, that was not clear that we know we could wait, and that was not that much a problem. Now I think there is a big realization from pretty much everywhere, and that's a big tick and big important things. There is money. The Green Deal here, the stimulus package here, and the green bonds or whatever, there is money to go for this transformation. People would debate if there is enough money or if there's not enough money, you know, but there is money already. We need as well solutions, and industrialized solution, not just super small scale, which is going to solve a microscopic problem somewhere. We need scalable, industrialized solution. I guess that's the three, which means that we can go forward. So are there any setbacks? I guess I can see a few. The one I cannot see is for instance, it's not important, we have more important things. And that's interesting. You know, we have a war started in Europe a few weeks ago. And at first, people, I had heard some people say, you know what, you know, like transforming, you know, our economy and everything so that it's greener, and ecological transformation may be going down on the agenda compared to other more serious things. That's exactly the opposite which is happening. And luckily enough, I think the Ukraine war not tells us, but reinforces the emergency to get out of importing fossil fuel in Europe. So it's more a reinforcement than anything. So I don't see that as a setback, as in you have more important things. I guess it's probably almost the opposite we're living today. So I guess setback will be to leave to the others to find you know, solutions, and I can live my life all by myself and just say I guess despair would be probably the only setback I would see. Hence my optimism, but optimism, not a blissful optimism again, but we can find solution, but we have all to go for it. So I guess this will be the only thing.
So you talk about Veolia, but now we want to ask you a question about yourself. So the first one is, when you were appointed CEO of Veolia, there was only one woman that was a CEO in the CAC, which are the 40 biggest company in France. Do you think there's like a change in the way women are included in a position of power? And also, what were the challenges you had to overcome as a woman in this industry and in your career in general?
I'm not so sure my industry is very different from any other industry. And I guess, when I discuss with other female top managers, they all think their industry is very specifically non-female welcoming. So I guess there is a common theme here. The first thing is, I've lived through what it takes for every woman to go into, from managing position to another managing position. And what's surprising at first is like we all, as women, live specific personal experience, which we think are only unique to what we are as an individual. And then you discuss with another lady or you read a book and you realize that we all kind of go through exactly the same type of example and anecdote of you are in a boardroom and you say, there is a question, what do we do about that? And then you answer, oh, what about we try this as a solution? Nobody seems to listen to you. And then the next guy on your left, John, says, okay, what about if we do exactly this, exactly use the same words, it does exactly suggest the same thing, and oh, John, that's a good idea. And I'm like, come on, like I just did say exactly the same. When it happens to you, you're like, okay, maybe I didn't use the right word, maybe it's me, maybe whatever. And then you discuss with another lady who's experienced exactly the same thing. So there is an element of commonality into it. Which is obviously the bias we live into. So you have to first realize there is a bias just to be able to address it. The next time it happens, you can use humor, and that's usually very, very efficient, by the way, but that's another story. So you have to realize what it is. In the end, other bias are about managerial style. Just to give you an example, a woman who has some authority is usually called bossy. Okay, I have never heard a man be called bossy in my life in a managerial position. So maybe there is a bias here. I don't know. So I don't want to multiply the examples because I guess, there is a common theme here. In the end, it's probably reinforces your and my never give up type of mindset, which probably was me anyway, but it reinforces it rather than just alleviates it. So probably it's made the woman I am now to have to go through these type of anecdotes and situations.
So you, as we said, you will become the CEO of Veolia in July, and you will also to some shareholders. We have seen, especially coming out of the COVID, that people are talking about stakeholder capitalism. So do you believe that our current capitalism is not adequate to respond to long-term problems such as the environmental crisis? And what do you feel is required from you as a CEO to address those issues?
I guess in Veolia, we are very uniquely placed because the incumbent chairman and chief exec, Antoine Frérot, has said, the purpose of the company, which I referred to earlier on, as well as multifaceted performance. So let me explain you what it is. So basically, usually in a company, you're measured as a manager against financial objectives. Of course, we need financial objectives because earning money is what a company needs to do just to be able to reinvest in what it believes into. So I guess money is important, but it's not the ultimate only goal. In other words, it's a bit like, you're driving a car. You need fuel in the engine, but you need to know the direction of travel as well. So money would be the fuel in the engine in my metaphor. And in Veolia, we measure the impact or the success, if you want, and impact is an important word, against various KPIs, which are against the various stakeholders of the company. So of course we have the shareholders and we have financial objectives, but we have objectives as well about our impact, positive impact on the planet, the communities we live in, and our customers as well as our employees. So we have 18 KPIs and our incentive as managers are based on those 18 KPIs. 4 of them are financial, the other 14 are non-financial, but measurable KPI. So I guess it's embedded into the organization, as in we have now more than 10,000 managers whose incentive, as in bonus at the end of the year, is based on financial as well as non-financial objectives. So I guess that's a very concrete answer to this shareholder versus stakeholders capitalism, which is already in existence in Veolia. And of course, you can imagine I have nothing but the intention to go on in this direction. But I guess you mentioned COVID. I think COVID has taught us a lot of things. And of course, we can think about the remote working and digital. Yeah, okay, fair enough. There is an element about reappearing of the borders. Suddenly you realize, okay, I cannot travel necessarily everywhere like that, just buying flight tickets. Oh, what passport do I have? And you have your Ukraine war is a confirmation as well of the reappearance of the borders. I don't think it's the end of globalization, but there is an element of realization that, you know, we have to be grounded somewhere, as well as, you know, of course, moving of people and goods and financial services. So I guess that's we have to be grounded and the head in the star as well. So it's really the two.
And I think we can go with one last question before opening for Q&As. And I'll make it as short and you'll answer the French way or not.
I was teasing myself more than you, by the way.
No. So what would it mean or take for you when you leave your position in a few years, or I don't know how many years, to be proud of what you did and to feel like you've achieved?
Hopefully not just a few years, I've been very few.
No, I hope so.
Not very few, because it takes time to build things. So I guess that's why it's important that chief execs don't stay 1 or 2 or 3 years, but longer than that, in my opinion, if you think they're doing the right thing. But it takes time. What would I be proud of? I guess having an impact as an organization, impact on the various stakeholders as I mentioned them. So of course, you know, for us, it's ecological transformation. So if I can say, you know what, there is something we can do in terms of helping with the resource crisis, with the, you know, the energy transition and so on. So first, thanks to everything I've done and the company has done, that's one. I guess compared to, and I would probably love to leave a company even more innovative and more inclusive than it is today. We're improving, but we still have probably some way to go there. That would be my take on that one.
So I think now, if you're okay, we're going to open the floor to the audience. If there are questions for... Sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It was really interesting to hear how much emphasis you place on innovation. And I really would love to hear more about, you know, how Veolia thinks about a strategy of innovation, because it strikes me that it's not a business or an industry that's maybe very easy to innovate in a green way, because the demand for green products is probably not very clear. But in a more general sense, like, I would like to hear you speak more about the challenges of like bringing, you know, and maybe a radical product to market, and maybe what's the role of other actors to help Veolia do this. Thank you.
Very interesting. I don't think we've probably already have all the answer to this question. I guess how is a large company like Veolia innovating? First is to be clear on what we want to innovate about. And it goes back to the purpose and what we want to do and the 4 challenges I mentioned. So the first thing, it's obvious, is like, you know, we want those innovations to be answering to one of those 4 challenges. The second one is to set the rule of it has to be scalable. Because it's all well and good to have something which in the end, if you're super successful, will you know, tackle 0.001% of whatever this. We're aiming at having an impact. So I guess that's the second one. The third one, and you alluded to it, is like that there would be a business case. Again, maybe super obvious, but when we're talking about green, Veolia is not an NGO. We have to invest and to have a return and to have customers ready to pay for our service. And at times, there may be a demand as in a philosophical one, but there is nobody ready to pay for it. And then we have to say, see you in a few years' time when there is somebody ready to pay for it. And in the meantime, that may be an NGO or a charity who's doing this. So that's the rules. And then in terms of the how, what's always super difficult in a company is a large company is two things. One is to accept to fail, and the other one is to be humble enough. Accept to fail, because there is no such thing as innovation, as in you decide something and then you have a plan which goes like that. It never goes as planned, never. And that's precisely what innovation is about. So you have to try and fail and try again in a little bit different way, and at times just kill it and say, it's not going to work, or at times just reinvent it in a different way. And I guess the fail fast and cheap, and this vibration is something we have to accept. And of course, when you're successful, when you're large an organization, at times it can be difficult. And when I pronounce those words, fail fast and cheap, you can imagine, even in our organization. So Estelle is telling us we can fail, yes, fast and cheap, but there is an element about that. So I think that's one thing. So the culture about that is quite key. And the other one is probably, I said, the humbleness, as in we are super large a company. Nonetheless, we may need, in some circumstances, partnerships or startups or whatever, or an ecosystem, and we won't be able to do it all by ourselves. So we have the global reach, which is super precious. We have a wonderful customer base, which is super precious. We have some technologies and whatever, but we may be missing something. And to be able to have a large group, a medium-sized company, a startup, whatever, an ecosystem, and to move around this is usually the second potential setback on innovating when you're a large group. So culture change is probably the main thing to be able to do it this way.
Hiya. Well, first of all, thank you for the discussion. It was very interesting. So I just wanted to pick up on a point you mentioned about how Veolia's role in supporting agriculture and using recycling processes to make fertilizer. And I understand how recycling itself very sustainable, but do you really think that supporting an industry that's as pollution heavy and as kind of contested recently as agriculture goes in the direction of sustainability?
I guess as a company like Veolia, we don't decide if there is a good or bad customer first. So yes, we work for oil and gas companies and refineries or whatever, as well as agriculture. So I guess because what our job is to do is not to say, to have a moral high ground or whatever, it's just to help them transitioning. I think that's super important first. And we generally can tell the one who are genuinely trying and genuinely are asking for solution, and there are many, 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 many of them. So I guess either you decide that you ban companies and whatever, and you can do that as a consumer. So are you not buying any agricultural product yourself without any chemical fertilizer? I don't know, maybe not. But in the end, our work is to try to help those companies to be more sustainable when we have solutions. And I can tell you, they're generally trying. So I cannot see a company like large industrial companies, when they are going to see Veolia, they know that we won't do just a greenwashing, whatever. we will just try and do, some move and some transitioning. I think that's super, super important. When I mentioned the agriculture solution, I was not talking about recycling those type of products. Maybe I made myself misunderstood. We're talking about having an alternative, which is to produce fertilizer out of organic content. So typically sludge, so human sludge, if you want, out of wastewater treatment plants can be, in a processed way with composting and so on and so forth, and mixed with other type of organic content can be a very good organic fertilizer. So it's an alternative to chemical fertilizer. And you have a very big, the same component in human sludge that you have in any fertilizer. So it's very good, but you have to industrialize the process to be able to meet the standards, and so that it's super clean, if you want, and that takes a bit of time. So that's what we do as an organization. So it's not, if you want, recycling, it's transforming something which is waste, if you want, into something which can be used and as an alternative to other type of fertilizer.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was indeed very interesting. I just wanted to come back on the merger with Suez. You mentioned, well, I understood the part about fortune favors the bold and the momentum, an important momentum. But what you mentioned that when an opportunity opens, one has to take it. What was the specific opportunity and window for the case of Suez?
Sorry, I haven't.
You mentioned
what was
that
the window? What do you mean?
You mentioned that one has to take the chance when it presents itself. And what was it for the case of Suez? What made it an interesting chance at that time? Okay, so just to describe a little bit, so Suez was, now it's delisted, but was a listed company. 70% of the shareholders were, I guess, listed on the market with, as you can imagine, everybody owning it. And 30% of it was owned by ENGIE, an organization, which is an energy company. And basically, ENGIE on the 31st of July 2020 said to the press, we would consider selling our shares, so selling our 30% in Suez. And just 4 weeks after, we offered ENGIE a fixed price, a committed price to buy them their 30% of shares. It just took us a month, and probably to have been able to convince them, therefore, very quickly to sell us their share was the key moment in the merger with Suez, I guess. So that's the one. And then we went into another phase, which was to buy the other 70%, and that's what the tender offer is about. A public tender offer, on the market and so on and so forth. But I guess my comment was more alluding to the first 30%, where it took us a month. And I guess a month, August 2020, if you may remember, we were kind of in the middle of COVID. So it was not exactly, that's why I talk about fortune favors the brave. We were not at all out of COVID, there was no vaccine, and, we were just, adapting to this, I wouldn't say a new norm, but to this big event, which was a worldwide one. We could have said, what, that's the worst moment ever to consider a merger, and to take some risk. But we thought this is a window of opportunity. We should go for it now.
Questions?
You mentioned at the beginning that Veolia had a long-term vision, 10, 15 years into the future. And I was wondering, how do you combine that long-term vision with the fact that the company is heavily reliant on innovation, which doesn't necessarily have a fixed timeline, and also on demand, which, as you said, can vary very quickly, as we thought with the plastic for 10 years, it was nothing. And then in a few months or 1 year, everyone wants plastic. So how do you combine those two? That seems quite opposed.
I guess there is no magic wand here, but that's the job of a chief exec to combine. If I had to say what's the big thing about the chief exec is to combine the short term, the midterm, and the long term. And you always have opposition and contradictory push between the short term of, say, investors who want the result of in 3 months' time, the long-term vision of innovation and the ability to at times fail. And I guess the recipe for me is twofold, is again, like a super clear vision of where I want to go, like, my ecological transformation is this one, super clear indicators of how to measure success against those. And then, to have, as I said, the fuel in the engine as well as in earning money now, allows you to be free. I guess if you're not earning money in this quarter, you cannot invest in innovation which may fail. You're not free anymore. You just have to be short term and that's it. If you earn money, then it allows you to invest in some things which will work and some others which may not work. So I guess it sets you free in some way, free to think midterm and long term as opposed to only short term. So that's the way I see the balance.
Opening the floor again.
Sorry, thank you very much for coming to speak to us. I want to go back on your personal experience being a female myself. You've mentioned that one thing, one trait of your personality was the more they made it difficult for you, the more you were saying that I want to try harder and I'm not giving up. So my first question, if there was something else that also helped you not give up and be where you are right now. And the second thing, what would you say to your 25-year-old self as an advice?
I would dare giving advice to anyone. Apart from a few, so maybe I'm going to give it a go after all. The first one would be, if you believe in something, you can go for it. It can be tough, but the will and the appetite or the passion drives the world. That's really what I feel. So even if it's not what you're meant to do and whatever, if you have some passion for it, go for it. And it goes with the attitude goes back to me personally. I always in my career was more a why not lady rather than a why lady. As in, when I was offered opportunities or ideas came across, I was like, okay, not sure, let's try. Why not? As long as I had an appetite for it again, as opposed to why would I do that? It's not exactly the scripted version or whatever, or what is the explanation behind? I never thought this way. I guess the why not? So the daring would be probably something here, and it goes with a never give up. When there is a will, there's a way, as we say. In terms of advice, there is I get for female, there is an element of pick the right husband or partner or whatever. No gender here, it's not the question. Because you have to have an element of I would never have done it without that, without some strong personal basis and strong foundations. So that's probably the second one.
Thank you. So you mentioned also the reappearing of borders, and I think it was an interesting comment in the current context. I wanted to ask you, so Veolia has a lot of sectors right now in France where there is like economically sometimes like a kind of dirigist culture by the state. Don't you think that a company involved, as you say, in private partnership, private-public partnership contracts, which has also a lot of municipalities as clients, and operating as like vital and strategic sector as recycling, water, waste. Would you be worried about the potential intervention of the state at some point in the coming decades, as today it's discussed for EDF, for example, as the recycling and water and waste will be as strategic maybe as energy providers?
I wouldn't say it's a French thing specifically. So I would agree partially and disagree partially with, I guess, what's underlying your comment. What I would agree is like, yes, those are strategic sectors. Strategic sector for a country, and there is an element of, you know, like it cannot be left to anyone like that. Not everything I've mentioned, but there is an element of strategic elements. That's not for, it's exactly why, you know, in China, in the US, in Europe, everybody thinks those strategic sectors are strategic. And I mentioned China, not only the Western world. Nonetheless, I guess there is a jump I'm not ready to make between that and therefore the state has to operate it, which is a different thing. And I guess the answer to it is that everybody has their role, including the state. We wouldn't have a business without legislation in Veolia. It wouldn't exist because in the end, it's always less expensive to put waste in the ocean and to burn, you know, in your courtyard or whatever. Without legislation, we don't have a business. So legislation is absolutely key, and regulation, if you want. So is money and the financial sector. Again, as I said, you know, we need that. We need people to have attracted investment and investors, you know, to do this transformation. So do we need companies like Veolia to be able to industrialize and to have real industrial solution, if you want, to those problems. So if you're able to be on this, you know, industrialized solution and professional and show our performance, you know, I guess I would say it's not necessarily a partnership, but the culture of we need all those, I'm confident will be key. And that's what we've seen in many countries over the years. But we need the state as well. Again, legislation, or what about the furloughing scheme during COVID? Everybody was super happy, and furlough was discovered a concept in the UK, which was not exactly a dirigist country in your comments in the recent past. So maybe we need all the actors to combine forces. That's probably the way I think more.
Hi, hello, thank you for your presentation. And I was just wondering, what is Veolia doing about the renewable energy? And if you think they really are a solution for a sustainable future?
So what Veolia does, so we're not an energy producer as a you know, primary energy. What we do is what we call local energy or territorial, I'm not so sure it translates well in English, energy. Which is the intermediate elements. Basically, to use alternative source of fuel is what we do, and to have a localized source of green energy is what we do. So we have part of the solution, part only, but we still have part of it. Just typically, we do many things in energy. One is to help our customers save energy, and the other one is to produce, again, locally sourced green energy. In terms of saving energy, we have quite a big business here, where we put basically all the know-how of the company accumulated over the years, plus we put usually sensors into a building, IoT, and a quite digital solution, a bit of AI. You mix all that, and we end up being able to save usually 10 to 15% of energy in a typical building without major work. So that's quite an interesting business, which is growing fast, as you can imagine. We do that in Italy, we do that in Spain, we do that in the Middle East, we do that in the US, typically. The second bit is to produce locally sourced green energy. We do it, say, energy as in gas. Again, I alluded to biogas from methanization of waste or wastewater. It's not insignificant. Just to give you an idea, in a country like France, if we were to equip all wastewater treatment plants, we would be able to replace 20% of the gas which is in the gas power plants by biogas. So it's not 100%, it's nonetheless relatively significant. And we do produce electricity as well from various sources of fuel. We have a great project in the eastern part of France, Lorraine, for those of you you know. Dombasle, you probably don't know where it is, but it's in Lorraine. And Solvay, which is a big chemical company, was using coal to produce actually power and heat and compressed air for their own process. Coal obviously is emitting a lot of CO2. They came to us and say, what can you do for us? And we've combined a whole project of replacing the coal by a fuel made out of waste. So basically all the non-recyclable part of waste, which is called RDF. So we replace that and it divides by 2 the CO2 footprint of this. Of their plant. So alternative source of fuel is another one we believe really into. And we can combine those and do part of the job in terms of energy transition. And of course, it's decarbonizing the energy, plus locally sourced. I insist, because we don't want to be importing fossil fuel if we want to be more autonomous in our countries. And the Ukraine war reinforces even more so this strategic autonomy that we need to put some emphasis on.
Any other question?
Maybe the last one is not possible because I have to go.
Okay. Last one. Sorry,
Yeah,
last one.
if that's possible.
There was another question. I know you already asked a question. There was another question behind. That's why we'll prioritize people who haven't asked. Sorry.
You mentioned the long-term vision and the goals of the company and how important it is. I would really like to know what would be your goals, because I guess even if you align with the former CEO of Veolia and the culture of the company, every CEO brings new goals and vision to each company. And I would like to know what would be your strategy if being a woman have an influence also on your management, on how you want to have a vision for Veolia, and what would you want to add to Veolia?
Again, I've tried to answer when answering to your question on that one. I will keep the existing strategy, the long-term vision, ecological transformation, and solution to those 4 big problems our planet face. So measuring our impact against that and my impact against that is really what's important for me. And how can we help with finding more solutions to these problems for our customers? That's really the one. And what I would add is, again, a bit more maybe inclusion and innovation, on the direction we've already heading towards, but maybe more of that. And I would say it's probably, the two are probably hand in hand, the innovation and inclusion. I guess why inclusion is important, you can say it's a moral duty. Yes, it is. But it's as well efficient for business and for a company. Because in the end, when you have 10 people and they do all like this, look like exactly the same, and they all have gone through the same exact, like career path, and they all are of the same type of age and gender and everything else, and nationality, they tend to produce exactly the same outcome. So if you want an innovative company, you have to put a little bit of mixture of people from this background and that background, from different gender, different nationality, different communities, and so on and so forth. that's usually the recipe for being more innovative. So I guess the two go hand in hand.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So this was our last question. So thank you very much for coming with us. It was an honor to have you and to talk about Veolia and about your future as a CEO there.
My pleasure. Thank you.